What is up, everybody? I am joined by Kevin van der Kooi, who is also known as Rotterdam. And for those in the poker community, you will recognize him, of course, as the other half of Nanonoko during the GGPoker stream teams. But Rotterdam, Kevin, what do you want me to call you? What should I call you?
Kevin or Roddy is fine. Like Rotterdam is a bit long. Roddy is fine. Kevin is fine. Whatever you want.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll call you Roddy. Let's, keep it like we're already here. So for those who are mostly, traditional poker fans, obviously a lot of this audience is going to be mostly poker fans who will be less maybe familiar with some of your background. And I watched a couple of interviews before this to kind of get a little taste of your life as a streamer and as a broadcaster, as a video game. I'm such a noob, a video game player, I guess. I don't know. So can you, for the audience who might be less familiar, kind of give us a little taste of your non-poker life and then also your poker life?
All right. So I think my online life pretty much started during Warcraft 3, which was a strategy game released by Blizzard in, I don't know, the year 2001, 2002, something like that. I found it out a bit later and I started playing it a lot. And then I realized that people were competing in tournaments for prize money. And I was like, hey, that sounds really cool and awesome. And I'd love to try that too. So I played a lot of Warcraft when I was young and eventually got pretty good. Never was like the best player in the world or something, but I was good enough to participate in the pro leagues, travel around the world, participate in some events. And that was really fun. I did that for a couple of years. Towards the end of Warcraft 3, I started focusing a lot more on commentating Warcraft events because back then they just used general all around esports broadcasters. But I always thought it was a bit of a shame that I felt they missed a lot of the things that makes Warcraft such a cool game. So then I offered to a couple of the tournament organizers, like, hey, why don't you guys let me commentate? I think I can do a good job and explain strategies. And they said, like, all right, yeah, you do it. Come to Germany next week and we'll put you on this show. So I did it. People liked that. And then I kind of just started becoming a commentator all of a sudden out of nowhere, which is very standard these days. But in 2007, 2008, there weren't really many people who were living off like esports commentary. So it was very cool. Back then, I already played some poker, like during the very early days, but I was always just a super amateur, probably just a losing player. Just enjoyed the game, thought it was fun. Knew a couple of the previous Warcraft pros that moved on to poker, but I never knew that much about it. Then later on, I heard more about it. I did play more, but StarCraft 2 came out in 2010, another strategy game. And since I was so big into Warcraft, I was like, I gotta give this a try, and obviously fell in love with the game. And I have been a professional StarCraft 2 commentator and streamer ever since. I'm pretty good in StarCraft as well, but not as good as I was in Warcraft. I'm good enough for people to watch me, but I'm not good enough to win a tournament ever. But that's also not my job. Besides that, because or at least like I was making a living out of StarCraft, I kind of moved around a bit. I lived in Germany for 2 years. And then I also lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years, where I worked for an American studio. And that was very cool because since I was living basically in LA, at least very close to LA, I was like, hey, you can actually play good poker over here. So I did go to Commerce Casino a whole lot in my life. I always just play lower stakes, just for fun on the side. And obviously, if you live in LA, it's also very easy to drive to Vegas. So I did that a fair amount of times as well. But yeah, poker was always just something that I liked, but it was never like my main priority in life because it was always just esports. But yeah, then I got to know Elke, I don't know, a long time ago already. And then I met Elke a couple of times at esports events. And, we had great times. Let's go for dinners, have some drinks. Met him in Vegas a few times as well. And then a couple months ago, all of a sudden, Elke DM'd me. He's like, hey, we're going to do this show. It's so sick. I think you'll be perfect for it. I was like, me? And like, why me? He's like, oh, no, I like your energy. You did with Nanonoko. It's going to be great, man. Like, just you and Nano. Just make some memes and make a good show. And I was like, I was really caught off guard by that because I was like, that's the last thing I ever expected. I did go to a couple like poker events that people organized with the idea of like involving esports. Did something with PokerStars a long time ago. And I went to quite a few of the Unibet battle royales where I am by no means a great poker player, but if you put me against other esports people, then all of a sudden I think I'm pretty good because, that's not the most difficult field in the world. But when Elke asked me for this show, I was like, I mean, it sounds like a really fun opportunity and I'd love to give it a try, but I really don't know if I'm suited for this. He's like, no, just try it. And yeah, then I signed up for it and we did a couple of shows and yeah, I guess it's been going pretty well because they still like me. They still ask me to come back. And I think I've been having a great time with Nanonoko, so that's really cool.
That's super interesting. Yeah, so clearly that was going to be, one of the questions I wanted to get into was doing the show with Nanonoko. So clearly Nanonoko has a very pragmatic sort of math wizard based mind. He's, notorious for multi-tabling a zillion tables at one time. But he's also very good at explaining sort of strategies and explaining, reasons why players might be doing something. I have to assume that you're maybe more of the color portion of the show, but talk to me a little bit more about that dynamic and, what it felt like to come into poker as a commentator. I've also been put in that position once or twice before where I know that I just don't know enough to be solid in these spots, but that's not always what everyone's looking for either. People are definitely looking for other elements in their entertainment. So talk to me about the balance of working with Nanonoko and finding your sort of footing in the show.
Yeah, that was obviously very complicated because I knew that pretty much everyone I was going to give commentary on was going to be a much better poker player than me. And then on top of that, I have a co-commentator who's a million times better in poker than me. And I'm like, what do I add? But the guys from GG, they said all along, they're like, there are so many shows already about poker where people explain all the mathematics and it's always about playing right in the perfect spot. They're like, we just want you to bring some energy and get excited over certain players, get excited over their plays, and you can have opinions even if they're wrong. Just say what you'd like to see, and then just kind of, they're like, just be yourself and try to make it a fun show. And I was like, well, I guess I can try that. And then obviously, like, I'm not, I don't feel comfortable like disagreeing with Nanonoko about anything because that'd be pointless, right? Like he's played a million more hands than me probably as well. But you try to find a balance where it's like, all right, like if I just always agree with everything he says, because obviously in poker, like even though you can say poker, it's been sort of figured out in a way, I think there's always different unique spots as well, because certain players, not everybody plays super GTO or plays according to the stats all the time. So then you can also say that you could make certain moves against player X, Y, or Z that maybe normally you shouldn't, but in that particular spot you can. And in that way, you just kind of try to find a story each and every single week, and you try to keep an eye on how a couple of the guys play, because yes, a lot of guys play similar. But I think after 17, 18 weeks of the high roller super millions, you definitely see that a lot of people bring their own flavor and their own style to these final tables as well. And yeah, not everything may always be super GTO or may not be necessary or the way that you're supposed to play. Just kind of try to focus on that and then highlight the plays that specific individuals have made and just get excited over it like that.
I love that. I actually was going to have someone else on another show that I was working on, a well-known great poker player, who said that they didn't want to come on the show to do commentary because they had done commentary on a super high roller type event before and had gotten a lot of, flack for different decisions they thought they would make or their play style, and just didn't want to subject themselves again to that kind of, ridicule. And it is an interesting spot because what we're finding with the Super Millions is that these are the biggest sickos in poker, like every week coming back to play these events. And, it's definitely hard to put yourself in the spot with these guys, but I love that you just like get in there and do it. And let's talk a little bit about some of the faces that you're seeing. I know that Dario Sammartino is now doing back-to-back final tables, who I happen to have kind of a thing for. I'm married, but like everyone loves Dario. But there's been, Michael Addamo has been crushing, Stephen Chidwick. Talk to me a little bit about some of the faces that are recurring in this game and that you get to just watch every week.
Yeah, what's been very fun for me is that, like, I have played poker for a long time, but like I said, as an absolute amateur, but I was always a fan of the poker shows in the early days, when high stakes poker was all the rage, or when WSOP was getting proper coverage for the main event. And I watched all those shows, or shows like The Big Game where Nanonoko was on as well, and Elke. So it's really cool for me to see now a couple of the guys that have been around forever, for such a long time, players like Isaac Haxton as well. He made it to one final table and he won it. So that's been super cool for me. Then on top of that, besides, you know, being a fun poker player, I'm also a poker fan, but I watch other streamers. So I watch a lot of Lex. Like Lex is obviously a fantastic streamer and just a great all-around guy. And then you see Lex praising the guys that he plays a lot against. You see people like European, for instance, make nothing but deep runs, Giraffe Ganger. And then to suddenly see those guys at the final table as well, it's just a very fun experience for me because I'm like, okay, like I'm not as involved where I know like every single high limit crusher around the world, but I do know those guys from the old days. And I do know those guys that I watch on different streams doing well. And it's really cool to see those worlds kind of come together. And then on top of that, you always have like the miracle stories of guys that satellite it in from $100 to $1,000 into the main event and then make their final table. Like I started playing quite a bit on GG myself as well. And then all of a sudden I see dudes that are, you know, in some of the much smaller tournaments, like your regular bounty hunter 52 daily main. I was like, I played with that guy. Now he's at the final table of the high roller. So it's just been a fun dynamic of a little bit of everything. And obviously, when you see guys like Michael Addamo win 3 out of the first 9, it's like, I don't even see how that's statistically possible. You know, like no matter how good he may be, that shouldn't happen, right? Like, because there are so many good players in these fields. But I think it's been very easy to get excited over a lot of the results and a lot of the plays that we've seen at these final tables. And obviously, I like, you know, Elke made it to one final table, and I obviously would love to commentate a little more Elke when he came in as a short stack. But for me, that's kind of the charm to see some of the guys that I watched on TV or like on internet television in 2005, 2006, 2007, to see them make final tables in 2020. I think that's pretty cool.
So you mentioned a little bit, you know, that some of the guys sort of play similarly, and this is something that we've seen, I think, especially in the high roller space, that trends start to emerge, and then that these trends become like mimicked, and then things become sort of more standard, where you kind of have some expectations about how hands are going to play out or what's going to happen. But for you now commentating every week, are you seeing a lot of things that surprise you, or do you feel like you're kind of getting more of a sense of like, okay, these are the standard things that happen?
Well, I'm definitely learning each and every single week just by listening to Nanonoko, and you obviously get an insane amount of information because it's whole cards up for everything. But what really surprised me the most is that when you see those big online crushes like Ben CB, like European, you kind of like in your mind, you're like, these guys are just going to dominate, but they actually just play kind of solid. I don't want to say straightforward, simple, because they do pick their spots well. And you'll see some 3-bets where maybe you wouldn't expect it. But it wasn't like the tornado or the whirlwind that you would maybe expand. You're like, no, the plays that they make, they actually just make a whole lot of sense. And then you see Michael Addamo, you just see him like this, putting people in like impossible spots and making bluffs in scenarios where it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Even with whole cards off, I don't understand the plays. But on one hand, you see trends, and you can put players in certain categories where it's like, okay, crazy good, crazy wild, or just like you've been on an amazing run. And then you see a couple of maybe the grinders, so to speak, where it's like, all right, like these plays, like, you know, it's starting to make sense. These hands kind of play themselves. But each and every single week, there are definitely hands where it's like, haven't seen that before, didn't expect. Like there are hands where you expect it, okay, this is all in without a shadow of a doubt. And then for some reason, because of like a weird turn card, the action just slows down. It's like they should have already been all in, and then the pot stays small. And then sometimes you see the 2 biggest trash hands just duke it out all the way to the river. And it's like, how the hell are we playing an 8 million chip pot right now where, you know, this should have been bet fold on in pre-flop. So yes, predictable sometimes. On the other end, like crazy stuff happens each and every single week.
I've been seeing one of the people on your team has sort of created a document where they're uploading like some of the craziest moments and crazy clips, and it does seem like every week there's really shocking moments and shocking things happening. And actually, as a interviewer myself, people ask me all the time, like, oh, what was the craziest interview? What's like the worst interview? Who's like the best person? And these are questions that I tend to just stay away from because I don't know, I just feel like they're not things that people like tend to note in their life. But I did get a list of questions to ask you. So I will actually include in there, is there any specific like performance or moment that's really stood out to you?
Well, performance has to be Michael Addamo, obviously winning 3 out of the first 9. The one that also really stands out is Isaac Haxton, who came in, I think, a second short a stack, and it was legit like 8 or 9 big blinds. And, you know, we have a little picking game, Nano and me, where we pick the potential winner. And I really wanted to pick Isaac Haxton because he's just a great individual and he's, I think, a great ambassador for poker. But I was like, no, I'm going to look like a stupid fanboy if I pick Isaac Haxton to win today. And then obviously he did win. And I was like, damn it, you know, I should have trusted my gut instinct. But one thing that really stands by for me is that often you feel like, okay, we've got 9 players, but after 30-40 minutes you know that it comes down kind of to 2 or 3 guys, and you're like, it's going to be one of those 3. And there was one final table, which I think was maybe week 8 or week 9, where Rune F, one of the regular online crushes as well, has made probably 3 final tables at this point. It really felt that was his tournament. Like, he was cruising. He was a very dominant chip leader, had over 9 million when the second guy in chip had 2.8 or 3 million at best. And it really felt that guaranteed top 2, but he was probably going to win it. And I don't know exactly what happened, but basically he lost a massive pot that he really didn't have to lose. He doubled somebody else up. Next round, he gets pocket 7s, and the guy he just doubled off had aces. The guy 3-bets him, and he just shoves pocket 7s immediately for like 7 million. I'm like, no. And like Nano and I are screaming, and the guy obviously snap calls with aces, wins the hand, and it felt in the blink of an eye, Rune F was destined to win the tournament, and then suddenly he was eliminated in 4th place. And I think that's one of the craziest things I've seen.
My gosh, it's so bananas. I've definitely, yes, seen things like this before too, where I have a theory that whoever is the person who's like destined to win the tournament never wins the tournament. Actually, whenever you as the media are like, oh yeah, this is totally over, like it's gonna happen, it never happens. But talk to me a little bit about, so something I'm like relatively new, I think, in the Twitch community. I did a show like 5 or 6 years ago that was kind of brief, but have dipped my toes in more in the last couple of years. And I've actually, for me, I was really shocked because the YouTube community, sorry guys who are out there watching on YouTube, but they're like really mean, a lot of them for the most part. And it's just doesn't feel so much like a community. Where the Twitch fam, it's like once they find something that they like and that they're into, are super supportive and super into it. And, you know, I think it really fosters a sense of community in a way that some of the other platforms don't. Now, obviously coming from the streaming video games background, you understand this better than anyone. You probably already had tons and tons of fans that came specifically to watch you. But talk to me about sort of what you're building in this Twitch community with GG and Nanonoko on these Sunday Millions. Is this like a specific group you feel like?
I mean, I hope so. I do think everything takes time, especially on a platform like Twitch, where there is obviously a lot of great content to watch 24/7 on a lot of different channels. But yeah, I think as long as you have a consistent product and people know what they're tuning in for every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central European Summertime, it's like, hey, that's when the pre-show starts. They'll go over the players. Not just us as commentators, but the players, they're also getting more familiar with a lot of these guys that keep making it to final tables. And like, it's always a bit complicated, and I can really compare this to StarCraft 2, where I've been a StarCraft 2 commentator for a long time. And at one point, you just kind of assume that your audience knows, maybe not necessarily the same as you do, but to some degree. And the same goes for poker, but that's obviously not the case. There's always new people discovering a game or finding interest in poker. And then guys that maybe are massive household names in the world of poker can be kind of new names for certain people that tune in at a certain point. And I think Twitch in general is just a good place where if you watch something together, I think it's easier to get along a little bit. Obviously, chat is moderated as well. And it's like, okay, I'll behave because I like this show. I know what to expect. I like the dynamic that maybe Nano and Roddy have, or I love the format, the structure of the tournament. I think it just becomes kind of like, hey, on Tuesday evening, it's like your favorite TV show is on. It's like, hi, Roller Super Millions is on. Gonna watch it. And I think it's easy to become a fan of something like that. If you got a good experience one week, you'll be like, okay, I'll check it out again next week. And I think it's very easy to grow into something like that. While if you just find random videos on the internet, it's like, oh, you know, mean comment, who cares? You know, it's just you by yourself. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, I'm personally, I've never really done the YouTube comments, but I've seen it in StarCraft as well. It's like, if I upload like this, they upload a tournament, quarterfinals, semifinals, and they're like, does this guy even know what he's talking about? Is he even good at StarCraft? It's like, I stream StarCraft 7 days a week on Twitch, right? You can watch me, like, I'm pretty decent. And it's funny to see how, yeah, YouTube and Twitch have always been very different. And I think that goes for the communities as well.
It's interesting, actually. That's something that it's interesting to think about, having to commentate and to be able to make content that's interesting to people who've been watching for the last 14 weeks, and then also the ones who just tuned in for this week. There's so many little elements that I'm sure you guys have to work out and think about. And speaking of how long you guys have been doing it for, how long has it been going on for, and how long will it be going on for? Can we expect to see the Super Millions into perpetuity? And then also, you mentioned that it's kind of an interesting structure. I think, does it start playing on Sunday? How does it normally play out that it comes to the final tables on Tuesday?
Yes, the tournament always takes place on Sunday, at least, if you want to play in it. I think it's Sunday evening around 7 p.m. Central European Summertime, something along those lines. Obviously, hours of late registration. And then they play all the way down till the final 9. So it's a bit similar to the World Series of Poker, where it's like November 9. Well, we have the Tuesday 9. So they play down till the final 9, and then we do the final tables on Tuesday. I think we've had 18 weeks so far. I think last Tuesday was 18. Tomorrow is going to be the 19th edition. I don't know how long it's going to run, but I do have the feeling that GG is pretty happy with it. Obviously, there's a lot of big names that have been signing up. A couple of the guys who have been like really bringing the action in nosebleed stakes as well, they also sign up on the Sunday evening. So that's really cool to see. And I think as long as it grows and it's received well and people keep tuning in on Twitch, I think there's a good chance it will keep going for a long time. But you never know. I think the world of online poker is always a bit of the wild, wild west, right? Suddenly like something is really hot and then everybody's feeling it. And then maybe at one point people are not feeling it anymore. They want something different. So we'll see. But I think it's really cool that GG has been so far very committed to it. They've been trying to promote the tournament a lot. And we're obviously keeping track of all the results as well. And there's a good chance that eventually it might turn into some sort of cool leaderboard and then see who's been the best performing players and maybe add something to that as well. We'll see. I don't know everything, but I do know that as long as they do it, I'll be enjoying it and I'll keep doing my best.
Especially in this, COVID world that we're living in. I love that, we as fans of poker sort of asked for, like, Lord, please give us some entertainment, give us the poker that we desire. And that GG really responded in a way that kind of fits for everyone and that everyone can do from the comfort of their own homes. I, for sure, I'm grateful for that. And so for those who are watching or who are listening, who are interested in and would like to tune in to watch, where can they find both you and also the Super Millions on Tuesday?
That's just over at GG's Twitch channel, so it's GGPoker Official. I'll double check that, but I'm very sure about it. I always host the channel as well. Yeah, it's just GGPoker Official on all one word. It's been a very long day for me. I'm sorry. And yeah, that happens every Tuesday. But the channel is awesome anyway. They do a crazy amount of giveaways, not just during the Super Millions, but also during a lot of the other shows. Obviously, GG is getting more and more streamers on board, and I'm sure they'll do a couple of cool stream takeovers with them as well. Like I know Elke has streamed on the channel in the past, but I think there's a good chance you'll see Kakiti stream more, maybe Easterdams, maybe I think Kevin Martin just joined as well. I saw a tweet about that. So yeah, I think there's many reasons to follow that tournament. And our show happens every Tuesday. Like I said, 8 p.m. Central European Summertime. We always do a 30-minute pre-show, which I think is actually really cool. The first weeks we didn't do that. And then it was just kind of like start, poker, but you know how it goes at the final table. Some people come in with 6, 7 big blinds. They shove first hand. It's like, well, we're trying to build up the personality, but he was on stream for 74 seconds and now he's out. So we go live at 8 p.m., but the actual poker starts at 8:30 p.m., which is 2 p.m. on the East Coast, 11 a.m. on the West Coast. And then we kind of just go over all 9 players that make it to the final table. And we always take a look at one of the hands they had on this specific run to the final table as well. And that's kind of cool because, they'll always find some interesting hands, some more interesting than others. But sometimes even losing hands is like, this is where he lost his first tournament live, and then he rebut, and that's how he made it to the final table. But yeah, it's a cool 30-minute build up until the actual poker starts.
I love that. I mean, even when you brought up the November 9, like, it's always been my favorite part of the whole World Series of Poker, right? Is meeting these players that you maybe didn't know before, getting to know their stories a little bit. And this is like a micro version, right, of that. The preview, the sort of like hype, you got to like hype everybody up. Here we go. And like you said, there's people that tune in that don't even know probably a lot of the players, or, you know, that some of the sickos online that people who follow live poker are not as familiar with. And I think I'm glad you guys added that. I definitely think that's the way to get people involved and to get them to, you know, get a hero or a dark horse or like someone that they want to go for. Are you the guy who goes for the hero or the dark horse?
I mean, Nanonoko has been making fun of me nonstop. That's kind of the thing. He likes teasing me, and I gotta admit that he has been getting the better of me in the picking game. I picked, like, there was one Arthur, a Russian player, and like a big high stakes online grinder, and I was like, okay, Arthur is gonna take it today. And then he did deliver, and that was really cool. And I rode the hype train for a while, but you know, Nanonoko kept picking Michael Addamo in the beginning, so he was right about that. And then he got a few more lucky picks in. So even though he like Nanonoko either picks the winner or he picks the guy who goes out first or second. And most of the time, the guys that I pick, they have decent runs. I most of the time go for a little bit of heart and then a little bit of mind. Like, obviously, I wanted to pick Isaac, like I said, but when he came in with 9 big blinds, I was like, I'll look really stupid if I do that. So most of the time, kind of go for the hero to some degree, but I don't want to make the super obvious picks. Like, if one guy comes in with 90 big blinds and the rest is 22, then it's lame to pick the guy with 90 big blinds. So
For
just
sure.
kind of, yeah,
For
throw it
sure.
up in the
And
air, try to
Nanonoko
make it
is just
fun.
so polarized. Like, what does he know anyway?
Yeah, I think he's been getting lucky. We'll get the best of it. Nano does have one thing, and that's my favorite thing of every Tuesday evening, where it's like he sees 2 whole cards and he's like, that's it. He's out. He's eliminated from the tournament. I was like, we haven't even seen the flop yet, Nano. He's like, oh, he's dead. Bye-bye. And then obviously somebody sucks out. He's like, I can't believe it. I was like, no, I kind of can, because this happens each and every single week. I feel like if anybody should know that the best hand doesn't always win, it's you, mate. Oh, yeah, that's really
Hashtag
fun.
that's poker. Like, come on, you know, what are we doing here? Well, I super appreciate you taking the time. It was really nice to get to know you and to meet one of soon to be another of my favorite duchies in the world. I'm sure you know the poker community has like a very special place for our duchies, for our homies from the Nederlands. I don't know what it is. Something about poker and Holland go together very well. For those who are listening, really quick before I let you go, where can they find you on the social medias?
It's basically Rotterdam08 everywhere, but I have to admit I don't use Twitter and Insta that much anymore, but I do stream almost every single day. Obviously, I stream a lot of StarCraft, but I've also been streaming a lot of poker, like some of my own tournament runs. I like playing, obviously, just MTT tournaments, no limit, but when it comes to cash, in a weird way, I prefer Omaha. I know that's maybe not very conventional to like Omaha more in cash and no limit more in tournaments, but that's kind of the way that I've been enjoying it. And I try to kind of find a balance of streaming at least like 40 or 50 hours of poker a month. So if you guys ever want to stop by, that'd be cool. It's been super fun for me. Like, a lot of people that played Warcraft or StarCraft in the past became poker players. So when I'm active over at GG, it happens every single day where people are like, oh, hey, Roddy, like, that tournament was crazy. And like on GGPoker, they talk to me about StarCraft. And it happens the other way around now as well, where my StarCraft people come in. It's like, hey, Roddy, when's the next poker stream? And I was like, wow, there's really quite a bit of crossover, and that's really cool to see. So yeah, twitch.tv/Rotterdam08 for StarCraft and poker action.
Awesome. I will definitely check it out. And I really appreciate it. I know it was a long day for you, and I'm really grateful for you taking the time and for giving the time to our audience and listeners. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.